How's everyone doing? It's Indiana here with Emptoraudio, and this is kind of a video. I didn't really know I'd make a video on this topic. I was going to originally write an article on it, but I don't think really anybody would actually publish this. But I wanted to talk about kind of the one thing about the audio hi-fi world that kind of, I think, in my opinion, kind of holds it back. And I'm on the younger side of, audiophiles. I don't really call myself an audiophile too much. I'd say I'm like a mild audiophile at that. I do enjoy audio, of course, but I'm not like, super into it, of course. When it comes to audio, I love listening to it. I love hearing gear. But when it comes to, really getting into like this, really into the science, really digging into it, that's kind of where I'm just like, I kind of get bored at that point. But previously, I've worked for a number of companies selling high-end audio. I was a Macintosh dealer for a number of years. And I think to best say it bluntly, I guess, is a lot of, hi-fi, not going to say any names or companies or anything like that, but a lot of hi-fi, it gets very pretentious, I guess is the best word for it. There's a lot of people on their high horse when it comes to audio. And it's kind of funny when you think about that, because if you take brands, say like Beats Audio, Sonos, maybe even Monster, these brands, what they do is they take audio, whether you think it's good or bad. I think they do make some actually pretty good stuff at times, but I'm not like a huge fan of all those brands exactly. But they take audio and they make it somewhat good, or good enough, and they make it, readily accessible and just easy to use to a lot of people. And that's what makes those brands, just sell like crazy. The average person, they might meet anywhere, a client, friends, they can hear the difference between, bad audio and good audio. Now, that can be a line that can, of course, move quite a bit there. But the average person, they can hear the difference. They say, oh yeah, that sounds good. Oh, that doesn't sound good. They have an opinion on that relatively quick. Most people can understand good and bad sounding equipment. So when you take someone that is, getting more into audio, what do they look for exactly? Say like, younger people, I'm in my 20s still, and one of the big things that I've seen from selling to many different types of people is the younger generations, they really look for ease of use, when it comes to just overall audio experiences. And they don't want to have the hassle, of, changing out cartridges on turntables. They don't want to be, tuning in speakers and tuning in, preamps and processors and stuff. They just want to, sit back, hit the power button, and go. And nothing wrong with that, of course. I mean, you're not necessarily going to get the best experience all the times, but the key thing is a lot of these new companies in the hi-fi world, they kind of have this, bit of like, oh, you gotta be this good, you gotta understand, at this level, of what audio should be to them. And, that's where it kind of gets a little bit, it kind of can turn a lot of people off when it comes to hi-fi. Some conversations I've had with people are like, oh, you're into hi-fi. It's kind of like being into like really fine wine, you get this $10,000 bottle of wine, you're trying to pick out, all these different flavors and scents out of this wine, and like, I can go with a wine and I'm like, yeah, it tastes like wine to me. It's one of those things where it can be an acquired taste, but how real is it at times? I'll give you a good example. When I was selling Macintosh for a number of years, we also sold a lot of our brands like Bowers & Wilkins. We sold Marantz and Sony. I had a client come in, and he already went to, I think, like one or two competitors. And he says, Indiana, I'm looking to, I want to do a nice upgrade to my system. I want to do 2-channel. I want to do turntables. And I know he's already, he's big into cars and watches. So I know he's definitely, a very enthusiast-driven person. So he loves, kind of the specs and a lot of the science behind it. And I said, okay, well, I'll just call him John. I said, John, what are you looking for? What are you looking to, pick up? What's your budget? What do you want to achieve with this system? And we sit down on my desk, and he puts these papers on my desk, and he's like, okay, so here's what your competitor A has. He's got, all the spec sheets of that speaker and the amplifiers and kind of the system they built for him. And he's got competitor B, and he puts that down, all the spec sheets, the pricing, and he's got like all the numbers there on everything, the wattage, the amplifiers, everything. And he's like, yeah, I want you to build me a system comparable to these two systems. And I say, John, that's cool and all. You've got these two systems here. You've got just numbers on these papers. Like, have you heard these systems? Have you heard these speakers? Have you heard the amplifiers? Have you listened to any of this stuff? And he's like, well, no, I'm just trying to, compare the numbers. And I'm like, well, John, have you actually listened to these systems? I'm like, because at the end of the day, when you sit down in that system, whether you buy it from me or not, are you going to be like, I am really glad I got that extra 30 watts of channel amplifier there? Well, no, of course not. You're not going to be like that. You're going to be, I'm glad I bought the system because I like how it sounds. And that's where a lot of people kind of get, lost at times. And so what I told John was, I said, John, here, come with me into some of our listening rooms. And I was actually the manager at the time of that company for just doing some of their, that branch actually. I managed the whole branch. And what we did was we ended up setting out each of our rooms. We had a number of speakers in each room and a number of amplifiers, so we could really tailor each experience to each client. So I said, if they're looking to spend, maybe $4,000, I said, okay, let's go to this room here. Here's our speakers between $2,000 and $8,000. Let's see which ones you guys like. And so I took John through the rooms. I said, all right, John, let's ignore price and numbers entirely. Let's just find what you like to listen to. So what do you like to, are we going for like bookshelves? Are we going for tower speakers? Do you want to go to like maybe 5.1 in the future? What are you trying to achieve here? So eventually we got him into a system, and I think it came in around like $10,000 less than what he was going for. And he was kind of like, is there any way we can, make this more expensive? I'm like, well, John, we can, but do we need to spend $10,000 more? Because what I want to try to do for you is find a system that you like listening to. Not that just because, of course you could spend as much money as you want on the system, but do you like listening to that system? That's the big key there. And so eventually I got him to a system that he likes, and I said, all right, John, I'm not going to sell you this system. What I want you to do is go back to the other two competitors, listen to their systems, because they have speakers that we don't sell, they have amps that we don't sell, and let me know what you're going to do. Like, do you like their speakers better? Do you like another brand better? What do you like exactly? Because they have those on display as well too. So the key there is I didn't want to just sell him a system because he thinks he likes it at the moment, but I want to sell him a system that he is for sure gonna fall in love with. And it's not just about spending, I've got 40 grand to spend on audio gear. It's not just spend 40 grand on audio gear. The real key there is spend 40 grand on audio gear that you actually like listening to. Of course, you always pick out the biggest, baddest amp you want, with the craziest, material and the craziest design and stuff there. But at the end of the day, are you really going to like it? I'll give you an example here. If we take a seasoning, like say, let's take garlic, and we take another seasoning like say saffron. Now, is garlic better or worse than saffron? Well, I mean, it's not like it's better or worse. They're used for different purposes. They're used for seasoning food. But saffron is much more expensive. Well, why? Because it's much harder to obtain. It's got other things to it that make it less common, maybe more rare, and more expensive than, say, garlic. Now, does that make garlic worse in any way than saffron or less useful? Well, no. It's because the type of dish you're making might call for saffron, it might call for garlic, might even call for both. And that's kind of the way I look at audio gear, is if you've got saffron and you like saffron, then by all means buy the saffron. But if you just like garlic and maybe you want to throw a bit of black pepper in there and maybe a little bit of chives, and that's what you like listening to, then that's what you should definitely buy and look for. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to say it's about money. It's not really about money at all. It's about what do you like to hear. And there's so many, specs and sciences out there about that stuff. And that's kind of what I was telling John was, it's just that you need to look at what you actually like to listen to. It's kind of like if you were to say, maybe read a movie review by like a movie critic. Is that going to persuade you to watch the movie or not watch the movie? Well, of course, you're kind of thinking, should I invest those 2 hours of my time to see that movie or not, based on what this person is telling me? But are you judging with your own eyes there, seeing that movie? Are you judging with your own senses, or are you just listening to someone tell you that? Because I've read movie critic reviews and they said, oh yeah, this movie's terrible, I don't like it. But I watched the movie and I'm like, wow, I actually love that movie. That's a fantastic movie. It's now my favorite movie of all time. So someone else's perception of that, gear, equipment, or audio gear can be totally different than your perception of it. Your ears can be different. your just overall what you like to hear can be different as well too. It can all be a number of factors there that can really contribute or not contribute to what you want to hear when it comes to audio gear. And at the end of the day, I think the real importance should be, do you like the sound of that gear or not? And of course, there are always going to be, advances in technology. But the interesting thing that we see about audio gear is that when it comes to gear, it's not like people are always saying, oh, I'm like 90% more perfect now when it comes to gear. That one brand there, they're making the absolute perfect reproduction of that sound, of that music or that movie track. Are they making that perfect reproduction of that? We don't necessarily really hear that. We're kind of just hearing about, how well a brand can, make the music sound. It's not necessarily becoming like this, race to becoming absolutely perfect. Like when we're talking about cars, it's like, oh yeah, who's got the fastest car? That's an easily, measurable way to tell about, who's got the fastest car? How fast can you go? It's easy to measure that. When it comes to audio, it's not so easy, mostly because, there's a lot of that pretentiousness when it comes to audio gear. And, there can be a lot of, priciness stuff in there too. If you're not spending $5,000 on audio gear, well, you don't know what you're doing, And that doesn't make sense at all to me. When it comes to just, throwing money at it, that doesn't really solve any issues there. And it's funny when you talk about, other enthusiast, related things, like say like cars, of course. What really drives people to those cars? Is it the collectibleness of those cars? Is it the overall speed, performance, specs? It can be any one of those things. But when it comes to audio gear, are we really that limited when it comes to gear? Say like a 1960s Mustang there. With that Mustang, is it limited that we can't make any more of them? Well, yeah, you can't just go back in time and make more 1960s Mustangs, but with a lot of this audio gear, we're paying those higher pricing, not because necessarily the piece is so expensive to manufacture, of course some are, but it's got a lot of that engineering time that goes into those pieces. So once that engineering is complete, most of the time to say make another, 50,000 units is just to manufacture them. And it's not like you gotta make a whole assembly line. It's not as complicated as a car most of the time to make some audio gear. So a lot of times we're putting these pieces of audio gear up on high pedestals like this. It's not like that they're becoming, you can't replace that ever. It's not like, oh yeah, this one amplifier will never ever be topped, and that's just not true. That 1960s Mustang, there are cars now that go for $20,000-$30,000 that can easily beat that car on the track now. So as we see these improvements, yeah, the gear might become more collectible as it gets older per se, but performance-wise, and what really matters is that audio quality-wise, that's always improving. That's kind of the beauty of audio gear. And as gear always improves now too, it's becoming, of course, a lot cheaper and more affordable as well. And that doesn't mean the gear is less good. Some reviewers have that in their mind that, oh yeah, this is not $1,000. This cannot be good enough. That's some reviewers actually have that kind of mindset. And another thing too is this is kind of more of preference as well. Is just, when we get a lot of reviewers, they mention, some of the music they listen to in the reviews. A lot of this stuff is like, not everyone listens to, classical and jazz. It's popular, of course, but are we really ever going to, attract a younger audience to hi-fi with just, listening to the dad's music? I'll say it bluntly, there we go. And there's a lot of this stuff where I read fellow reviewer stuff and I'm like, I don't even know who that artist is. I've never even heard of that, It's like some 60s or 50s or 70s artists that I've never even heard of. And they're talking about, all the riffs and the guitars and the drums in there. And I'm like, never even heard of that band before in my life. And, very few reviewers actually consider, the latest music trends when it comes to, what they listen to in their reviews. In my reviews, I like to listen to, current stuff. I'm into, the rock scene and stuff, and a lot more of, some of the hip hop stuff as well too. And, we, as reviewers, you can't just kind of be stuck in this, well, if it's not 70s and vinyl, then it's not worth anything at all. There will become a time eventually where, a lot of these, hi-fi guys won't be around anymore, and it's going to be handed off to the younger generation as they get into hi-fi. And if we're all just listening to this old stuff, what's the point of reading those reviews half the time? And not saying that the reviews are worthless at that point, but it just kind of shows the disconnect there between, a lot of the hi-fi guys and the people who actually kind of want to get into it and kind of buy it too. There's just so much of that, I guess you could just call it, kind of being on a high horse there, really pretentiousness at times. Of, you gotta have, if you want to listen to these headphones, you gotta have a $1,000 amplifier to go with it. You want to listen to these speakers, you gotta have a listening room. There's all this stuff out there that kind of just, doesn't really persuade people to want to buy it or get into the hobby at all. Is it really necessary? Not really, half the time. I mean, if you want to get into hi-fi audio, you should feel free to do it the way you want to do it. Of course, there's always suggestions to listen to. There's always, better ways to set stuff up. But at what point do you become, how much better can it actually get for the price point? And I will admit, when it comes to a lot of like speaker cables and just overall interconnects, I do think there's a difference between a cheap interconnect, like that comes in the box, and of course a decent, $100 interconnect. But when you get into these like $1,000 plus interconnects, I've heard them. Is there a difference there? To me, no. I think a lot of that's just snake oil, and it's a great way for companies to make profit, as long as there's an enthusiast market there for it that thinks they can hear a difference, people will buy it. And that's why they sell it. That's what my dad does. He sells a lot of the really, really high-end stuff. I do install with him all the time. Do I hear a difference in that stuff? No. There's a lot of, crazy stuff out there when it comes to hi-fi. What are those things called? Those isolation blocks that people put their cables on to not touch the floor. Come on. That is just absolutely ridiculous. There's so much out there for hi-fi that is just so pretentious. That's kind of the word of the video here. That you look at that, and I would never get to that point with hi-fi. That's just craziness to me about just drinking the snake oil by the gallon there. And it's just one of those things where it's like, there is no way, is the science there? Yeah, maybe on like the atomic level, but are we really going to hear the difference there? For me, in my opinion, no. Honestly, there's no way. So it's just kind of, a lot of the stuff in the hi-fi world like that, it turns a lot of people off that kind of want to get into the hobby, and you started seeing that stuff, you read the reviews, and I would just encourage you, if you want to get into hi-fi, check out some of the audio shows. If you got any ones around you, pop into any local dealers near you. Now, don't waste their time, of course, but see what they can offer you. A lot of times they offer pretty good deals, and they know they're competing against Amazon and Best Buy and a lot of the online stores. But the guys that work in these stores, they're very experienced with hi-fi audio, and as long as you get a good store that's not just trying to sell you the most expensive pair of speakers in the store, they're trying to sell you what you want to listen to. I think that's really a gold mine there to have. Basically worth its weight in gold is that store. So that's kind of where it's really important there. But of course, when it comes to a lot of other hi-fi reviewers, I feel like I'm just kind of a bit on my own at times when it comes to, I'm not into, really, really like specific classical and jazz music that just bores me, honestly. And I'm not, listening with one of these crazy listening rooms where I've got, $100,000 worth of gear sitting around to just, absolutely dial in every little bit of gear there. Yeah, it's cool and all, but at the end of the day, I feel like when I look at gear, when I review gear, for me, the important aspects of it are going to be, not in any order, value, ease of use, how good does it sound? And that's the three things that I always look for, and I mention in every single review. Everything else to me is secondary. You can have the most crazy engineered piece of gear with the most crazy materials, but those three qualities there, yeah, it could be super easy to use, it could sound absolutely incredible, but if it costs $500,000, well, it's kind of worthless there at that point, because who could afford it? What's the point? And there's always going to be someone, of course, that's going to buy that, but look at brands like, I mentioned before, like Beats and Sonos and Monster. They sell a ton of gear, and arguably they're bigger than pretty much any other hi-fi, well, I call them hi-fi brand, but they're bigger than, any of those really, specific brands out there that really, dial in on the enthusiast hi-fi market. And it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not saying you gotta be, make it really cheap and mainstream, or you gotta, we'll pull back some of the audio quality to sell more and make it a cheaper price point. No. But just don't have it in this kind of, realm of, well, oh, if you're not, have this equipment, and we're talking in all the scientific numbers, and we're going all crazy with, all the frequency responses, and we're all showing these graphs everywhere. We don't necessarily need to show that. We can just say, hey, here's some reviews on this, let's talk about how well it sounds. What are you looking to hear exactly? There's lots of ways you can sell audio gear without, overwhelming someone with all these numbers and just kind of confusion. If you're not running, 1,000 amplifier, these speakers are just going to sound absolutely terrible. There's lots of us out there where it's kind of just like, if you can't, get to our level, well, too bad. There's so much that's out there where it's really kind of just, it puts a lot of people off with hi-fi. And that's kind of my 2 cents, guys. Kind of just always what I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to say. So I don't expect much from this video. I'm probably going to get a bunch of downvotes in this video anyways, but it's just something that I've always really wanted to talk about. I had like an article I wanted to write about this as well too, but I figured no one actually published this because it's not really, in the narrative of hi-fi that is known well right now. So, but thanks for watching, guys. You made it this far. Really appreciate that. And if you leave a comment below, love to hear it, guys. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Have a great day.